Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about the Holy and Discipline talent trees for Dragonflight. I'm going to put together a couple of sort of makeshift builds, and then also what I think are going to be some of the potential endpoints, really, for raids and for M+, as well as just some of my thoughts around the gameplay that surrounds it, okay? So on the left side here, we have our mock-up and everything that they have so far. And then the right side is the talent calculator that Wowhead has put together, so you're not going to be able to see the actual images themselves, but I'll try to boom, 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 go through some of the tooltips and everything really quickly and also talk about why I'm making some of the decisions that I think that you're going to be seeing. When it starts off, there is like a very hard shift of like left versus right when it comes to the baseline priest setup. You start with Prayer of Mending, which is kind of interesting for Disc to be able to get access to, and this is going to be our Disc tree to start us off. And it's going to be that first starting point. But then there's Prayer of Mending doing additional healing, getting Renew, getting Benediction, Renewed Faith, Say Your Prayers, all these different Prayer of Mending synergistic abilities that you're just not really going to be taking as a Discipline Priest. Because there's also a couple other things like Improved Smite, where you're dealing additional damage just by talenting into it, which is amazing for Disc Priest. There's a couple other Smite modifiers that you have as well. You also have things like Feather, Body and Soul. There is Enlightenment, which is interesting to get for Discipline as well. Because, I mean, Disc was pretty tied to their innervates for a lot of Shadowlands progression. So it's kind of nice to be able to have access to more mana return. And there's actually a lot of it. Interestingly enough, Power Infusion, yeah, it's back as a talent. I know, everyone's upset, whatever. It's back. But it's also in a very mandatory position for Discipline, with it being your primary avenue to get the only Covenant ability, which is Mind Games. So it's really nice that Mind Games is the only one, because I don't think there are any other abilities from the Covenant tree that I really cared about. Alright, but you have Shadow or Death, Shadow Mend, there's some other synergistic abilities like Masochism you could have access to. There's also some where it could just completely reduce any of the damage, like in Taming the Shadows. There's a couple other synergistic abilities there. Having some reduced cooldown on Mind Blast is kind of nice. You also get access to Twisted Fate, which is also an avenue to get Shadow Fiend. So Disc obviously is going to want to have access to Shadow Fiend, but in a raid-oriented build, you wouldn't have to choose between Twisted Fate and Schism anymore. You could just have both, which is pretty insane. Shadow Fiend can also lead you into additional Shadow or Pain damage, which also will give you mana when it expires on a target that dies, or an enemy dies with it. You can also get some mana return, which is great. And you're also getting a mastery buff when you have Shadow Fiend out, which can be particularly helpful for a lot of Discipline ramps. So already from like the baseline tree that we have so far, there's already a lot of building blocks that you have access to for how it wants to get set up. A lot of defensive traits and everything like that. So basically on the path to taking Mind Games, which is what I was looking at doing, you would have access to Angel's Mercy for extra defensive capabilities. You get your double power infusion with Twins of the Sun Priestess. So there's already a lot of talents you can sort of double up on that you couldn't in Shadowlands, and some legendary effects you can kind of double up on as well. Also means on the way to getting Mind Games, you get Angel's Mercy for Desperate Prayer cooldown reduction. You get Fade with Translucent Image for damage reduction. And then your Shadow or Death deals a little bit less damage to you. Like, huzzah, you know. Similarly, your Shadow Fiend can then go into Mindbender, which can give you Rabid Shadows for more attack speed. Rabid Shadows was the Shadow Priest conduit that Discipline ran the entire expansion, so that's also pretty nice to be able to have access to. And some of these bottom tier ones, you have things like Shadow Flame Prism, which is a legendary, getting the cleave damage for your Mindbender. You get Crystalline Reflection, which is a legendary that nobody wanted and nobody bothered taking. I don't think that you're really going to see much here at all. This is literally like bad legendary, conduit, and conduit. Like two defensive conduits. But in order to reach these defensive conduits, you already have to go after Angel's Mercy. And these bottom row talents would come at the expense of things like Translucent Image for your Fade damage reduction. There are some interesting left side things, and I'm going to hold that until Holy Priest comes around. But I think that you're going to have a build that's going to be, obviously, working on building up your ramp capabilities, working on giving you stats from like Puppet Master for when you have your Shadow Fiend or your Bender active. Things like that will be really helpful. And further having just damage increases, things like Mind Games is going to be really good when it comes to be able to set up more ramps more quickly. And when we tie ourselves into the Discipline Tree, that's this one on the right side, this is also going to be your building block of Purify and Purify again. They still had to, I think it's like Atonement, and then it's Purify right here. But that's going to be moved and changed around a little bit later on. But I wanted to talk again about those like endpoint destinations, because there's a lot of times where you have to like go through specific areas to be able to get what you want. It would be kind of interesting, not gonna lie, if you could like skip taking pain suppression, but the second a tank needs it, you're like, oh, I didn't talent into that, you're gonna just be kicked from the raid. But it is a little funny because you'll go into like pain suppression, and then it's like, do I want Shining Force? Maybe if I don't need it for this fight. What about, you know, Powered Shield reducing pain sup cooldown? Like, you would think that like cooldown reduction for pain sup would be using keys, but you don't really cast that much shield as is, you know. And then you have Psychic Voice. You have like a bunch of sort of niche spots, we'll say, that don't always have a lot of value in a raid environment. You know, when you have Powered Radiance access, which is wonderful, you can get a third. Wait, I don't know if I'm crazy or not. Oh, I guess it's only going to give you the second charge. Sorry. Yeah, I'm so used to the tooltip of Radiance showing that it has 2 charges baseline. When I read that, I was like, are they giving you a third? But now it's just going to be a second one. Unfortunate. But yeah, left side, you're getting your Radiance charge, your Radiance and its extra charge. Right side, you get Schism, and there's also buffs to Schism for its duration increase, which is really, really neat. So you're already able to have more follow-up output, which I thought was really good in BFA, where your Smite actually did a lot of atonement output in general. And this is probably just going to help that even more by having a longer duration on Schism. Power the Dark Side effectiveness. This is really strange, having to go through Contrition, which is just super, super weird to be able to get access to, because you're really not going to Defensive Penance very much if things hold true. We'll see if they actually end up buffing Defensive Penance value, but that's how you're going to have access to things like Purge the Wicked. You can also have things in keys like Revel and Purity, where you can start spreading more of the Purge the Wicked damage out, which would be really, really awesome. So that's something we haven't really been able to do for a while because Divine Star has been so good. And then you'll also have other penance buffs like Castigation, but this is how you get to Evangelism. So having to go after a talent like Contrition to be able to reach Evangelism, and that's the only real route that you're able to take to get there, feels super strange, especially if history holds true. Like past 2-3 expansions, Contrition's been a talent and we just never ended up using it. It might be a little bit weird for that. But getting to Evangelism, it competes with Spirit Shell, but since Spirit Shell is still 80% of the normal value instead of like 100%, and we're losing access to things like Clarity of Mind for extra atonement duration, I don't see a lot of Spirit Shell, at least on first impressions. I think it's just going to be Evangelism all the way, and I'm really disappointed, I'll be honest. I'm really disappointed to see Spirit Shell still there. You have other conduits that they're going to get access to. You have things like Pain Transformation, which is an instant heal after your Pain Sup. You have Exaltation, which notably was quite good for Spirit Shell, but very bad. Very, very bad when it came to using it with just Rapture. Just this duration increase and shield enhancement was never really that good at all. So, yeah. One of the things that I also wanted to be able to note is Lenience. Not having to choose between Evangelism and Lenience and being able to potentially take both is ridiculously insane. Lenience had always been able to stack with other Disc Priests, so you could just have damage reduction all the time with all these different Disc Priests in the group. And if that holds true going forward, the double Disc Dream could still be alive in raids as a result. Not only because of, bringing Barrier, bringing Burst Healing, but also the damage reduction you're bringing. And there's also a lot more rapid burst effects that you're able to put together because you're getting Mind Games, you have your Schism, you have a lot of big setup damage, and you're also getting Light's Wrath back. You're dealing radiant damage to your target, which is fire and holy damage, and it's increased by 10% per ally affected by your atonement. So you could have some extremely, extremely burst-heavy windows without the extra atonement duration that Clarity of Mind gave you in the past. You are also getting atonement duration from Indemnity, which is for Powered Shield, giving you 2 more seconds of atonement. Or you could go with Soladium, which is 2 more seconds on a Shadow Mend. You can potentially take both with these, but I would imagine with most ramp windows, you're probably just going to be taking one of them, and I think of them, you would probably go after something like Powered Shield for a raid environment. There are a lot of like really good buffs and things that I'm not quite sure how we're going to be able to properly weave in there that you'd want to have access to. You have something like Evenfall, which is giving you Power of the Dark Side, or a chance to get Power of the Dark Side off Radiance casts. It's pretty good, but the chance to be able to get that buff is always kind of the thing that is a question, you know? And the fact that you're not being able to cash in both, if you get like 2 charges of Power of the Dark Side, not being able to expend both of them into one massive penance feels pretty bad. Harsh Discipline was interesting. When Atonement is healed a total of 100 times, your next penance is free and fires 3 more bolts. I really love the idea of this, but the timing, again, is going to be like one of those weird concerns. Is like, how long are you going to be able to hold on to a buff like this to be able to weave it into your ramp? Because getting 100 heals out of Atonement should not be hard at all, especially with just how much damage, how much dot effects, all those other different things. If you're able to spread around like Purge the Wicked, you know, this could feel really good in a key environment. But I haven't touched upon what is ridiculous for the key environment. It's Divine Star. Now, yeah, it's the same thing that you're used to. It's just Divine Star doing Divine Star things. But you also go down this right side tree where you're able to have Shadow or Death converted to Atonement Healing on execute targets. And then finally, you get Wickedness. The Wicked Star deals shadow damage over 6 seconds to enemies in its path and silences enemies for 2 seconds every time that you're spitting this out. Oh my god, what a ridiculously busted ability in keys. And maybe it'll have some kind of effect in raids as well. Being able to just put out a blanket silence to a number of enemies, especially when they're not stacked together, that's wonderful. And it makes it a lot easier for tanks to be able to group things around. It makes it so much easier to like shut down damage onto your party. The benefits are overwhelming, and I think that this is going to make Disc ridiculously insane in a key environment if this even makes it to alpha or beta or whatever. So super ridiculously exciting for that one. I went over the extra Atonement durations. Now, there's also another side. Shadow Covenant's back, and for like the 4th or 5th time, they try to revamp it. Shadow Covenant, for 7 seconds now, your Shadow spells deal 25% increased damage, but your Holy spells deal 50% less damage and healing. Okay? Once again, they keep trying to revamp it, and then the more that you chase this tree, you have additional duration out of the Shadow Covenant buff, which can be kind of good, kind of bad. But then you also make it so that your penance becomes Dark Reprimand. So you're going to be able to cast penance and everything like that. You're going to be able to cast penance during your Shadow Covenant window and not have a reduced effect, which feels great. So you have a couple different things to be able to beef it up. But I think there's a lot of other stronger options that you're kind of fighting up against. Some of them, I'm not quite sure how best I wanted to fit them in. Like, in a raid environment, maybe you would go after Divine Star or Halo or something along those lines, particularly if people are able to stack up. This is definitely not the end-all, be-all with, like, a talent build, but these were a couple of the things that I most wanted to look at how you'd be able to sort of piece them together. Because I know you want to go after Light's Wrath, and I think Indemnity is going to have a lot of value. Evangelism kind of forces you to go down the Contrition route. So there are going to be some of those little sacrifices here and there that you do have to sort of play around. And it would be interesting looking at some fights, especially something on like farm, where you say, oh, maybe I could actually give up pain suppression on this farm boss that we don't really care about in favor of getting some more Atonement output or something like that from my Mind Blast, or getting some more penance damage, or getting Shadow Covenant or something. So there are a lot of like progression type builds that you're going to be going after, but then there's going to be a number of them where you're going to be able to maybe play a little bit greedier. All right, let's talk about Holy as well on this one. With Holy, like I said, in the regular priest build, you kind of slant to the right for like damage, and you slant to the left for healing. And I didn't touch on all the talents in the regular priest tree, so I'll talk about some of those things now. Obviously, when you start slanting to the left on this stuff, you start moving towards Renew and Renewed Faith, increased healing on targets that have Renew. Benediction, Prayer of Mending giving you Renew. Say your prayers, your Prayer of Mending not losing charges. You get more mana. And then you start going into this really, really interesting side window where you go into Holy Nova, and it switches from like healing stuff into more damage, and then it goes right back into healing. So you get Holy Nova, more smite damage when you're shielded, which is very strange for a Holy Priest to be considering. but it also is your avenue, is your route to be able to get more Renew healing and a lower cost, which could be really interesting to see if Renew is actually a castable ability once again. Or an actual ability you would bother using. Unwavering Will, this was a wrist legendary from Legion, where the cast times of Flash, Heal, Prayer of Healing, and Smite were reduced. And then finally, Holy Word Life. So rather than a Shadow Word Death, you have Holy Word Life. A word of holy power that heals the target. If the target's not below 20%, the caster takes damage equal to the amount healed. So if you heal somebody for 5 and they're above 20% health, you will also take 5 damage. But your healing is increased by 150% to targets below 20% health, and it's a 30-second cooldown. So this may not be like a lay on hands or anything like that, but it is pretty damn close in terms of the net effect it could or should have for your team. If you're seeing somebody that's really low, you're going to be able to push their health up to a reasonable level, to a more comfortable level, to potentially save your life. This reminds me a lot of Saving Grace, I think is what it was called, back in Warlords of Draenor, but it would be like a big bursty insta-heal, and then it would like lower all your overall output. But this one I like a lot because there is going to be that sort of benefit to use it when targets are not below 20%, because if there's like a tank buster coming up, or, you know, there's like bursting or something and you're not able to dispel everybody and somebody's going to die from like the next tick, you can sacrifice a bit of your health to be able to prop up somebody else for just a little bit longer. It kind of creates space for you as a healer. And for Holy Priest, that's particularly good because there can be a lot of like wind up and setup, especially when you start looking at the specific Holy Tree. So I think this is like a wonderful ability that Holy Priest is going to slot into all the time. For the side of Disc, I don't think that they would do it because they would probably want to go after Mind Games if Mind Games maintains its strength that we are used to from its Covenant abilities. Once again, this like middle tree is just bad with like Crystalline Reflection, Light's Inspiration, Charitable Soul. It's a bunch of like meh conduits that got slotted in there, so I don't really see you taking that. This build would also, this sort of makeshift build I made for Holy Priest, would allow you to have Twist of Fate, but then it starts skipping over things like Shadow Fiend. I think I still had like 3 more points where I could go after some like smite damage, or I could start shifting the build a little bit more to play around for an M+ environment if I wanted to have access to something like Shadow Fiend for more damage. You could potentially even take Shadow Flame Prism for like a pure damage build or something like that for keys. But for raids, I found there was a couple extra slots where, okay, I could take some, you know, reduced mana cost. I could have Shackle Undead if I needed it. I could just deal more damage out of Holy Nova. You'd have a little bit of flexibility with this Holy Tree where you can hit your destination and still feel like there's a couple other things you can dip your toes into without feeling bad for missing out on them. I won't feel bad if I don't have, you know, Throes of Pain for Shadow or Pain damage, or if I don't have Shadow Fiend in a raid, I won't feel so terrible or anything like that about it. It'd be pretty nice to be able to go and take Shadow Fiend and then be able to take the Mana Return, or be able to take Shadow Fiend and be able to get the Mastery benefit or something like that. And I think that's a little bit of like give and take that you can go after on that one. You can also dip in to fade damage reduction pretty quickly, which is always really nice. Now, Holy's build is very strange. It's very, very strange. Early on, you're getting things like Prayer of Healing, Serenity, Holy Fire, all your baseline abilities. You got Sanctify, you got Chastise. Wonderful. You can choose to take the Chastise stun, or you can move on. You get Guardian Spirit, Trail of Light, Spirit of Redemption, your building blocks. You very, very early on get your building blocks. From there is where it starts getting a little bit strange. In order to get Divine Hymn, you have to go through Cosmic Ripple. In order to get Symbol of Hope, you have to go through and get Surge, right? Binding Heal does return, which is interesting, but I don't know if there's actually a place for this ability. It's going to heal you, your target, and another friendly target within 20 yards, and reduce the CD of Serenity and Sanctify. But I don't really know if there's a place for this ability for Holy Priest at all, because there's a lot of incentivization. I'm a little hungover. For casting Renew by taking this left side tree with Blessing of Renewal, where it heals more and has a reduced mana cost. There's also areas where Renewed Faith targets receive more healing when they have Renew on them. You have Benediction. You'll even go back to having Holy Word Salvation, which will blanket renews onto all the players in the raid. So is there that much incentive to use this ability, or it might be a little bit more niche? I'd have to try it out, but I'm not quite sure on that one. You can always take Shining Force, Psychic Voice, Guardian Angel. You also have Afterlife. And they're all on these different sort of wings that you can kind of jump into, and you can do it very quickly and easily. So I like a lot of the setup in terms of where these extra talents are. Because when you're early progging, yeah, maybe it'd be wonderful to take Afterlife so you can just have that extra res or res protection or whatever. Maybe you do need Shining Force for a knockback. Maybe Binding Heal does have a place. Something like Holy Conductor, where Surge of Light has a chance, an additional chance to occur if your target is affected by Renew or Holy Fire. This one could be wonderful as well if Renew becomes a larger building block of how Holy Priest heals. So there is some good options that you have around there, which I think bodes well for the future. One of the big things is you can actually have access to Light of the Naru for more cooldown reduction for your Holy Words, and still take Holy Word Salvation. Or take Apotheosis when it comes to M+. So even more so than I think than most of this expansion, except for obviously this past tier where you had your set bonuses, I think we are going to be much, much more rapidly cycling through our Holy Words, which really bodes well for the spec. So once you get Divine Hymn, you can take that Piety of Mana, where Cosmic Ripple heals more and restores more mana. So again, you're getting a lot of mana restore, you're getting a lot of healing from just more Holy Words, but when those Holy Words return, you're also getting a burst of mana back. So you could very, very aggressively cycle through your abilities, more so than I think we've done in the past. Once again, when it comes to support abilities, you have something like Circle of Healing reducing Sanctify, Prayer of Mending reducing Serenity, and I think there's Holy Fire reducing Chastise. So you have boom, boom, boom across the board, where you're able to have the net effect of Harmonious Apparatus Legendary, but it's kind of broken into a couple different talent pieces there. Gales of Song, Divine Hymn heals more, and the stacks of additional healing are also increased by 4%. So you're able to get, what is it, 8% or something like that per stack. So you're getting up to 5 stacks, and you're getting like 40% healing on the raid, something like that. Getting a lot of extra healing onto the raid with Divine Hymn, and Symbol of Hope is giving you that cooldown back and a lot of extra mana. I wish it was just flat mana, but you know. Now, Lightwell is back. Lightwell is back, and it's very exciting, but it's still just sort of a standard Light Spring. I'm a little annoyed that there isn't any way that they could make it so we could have control over this, because I think that would be especially good in a raid or a key environment where you can have the ability to place your Lightwell heals onto the targets that you would like to, and you can choose the level of which the charges are consumed. But I am glad the Iconic ability is going to be making a return. Maybe there's going to be some set bonuses or something in the future, Copium, that could actually have some more interaction with it. But one of the things that I really dislike about Holy Priest is the lack of interaction with its raid cooldowns. You have Divine Hymn, it's Fire and Forget. You have Salvation, it's Fire and Forget. And now you have Lightwell, which is very, very Fire and Forget. I think some of the abilities like the Holy Word Life are a really good change. I think they're very active, they're very involved, they reward good play. But I am a little disappointed that there's like a third major raid cooldown of sorts that you just place it down and then it does its work, you know? I think Holy needs more things like Resonant Words, where it's saying, okay, cast a Holy Word, then cast a Holy Word affecting spell like Heal or Flash Heal, and you get a buff, you know? I think those things are great. Getting access to something like Holy Oration for reducing the cooldown of your Holy Words even more. You know, synergizing with Light of the Naru, synergizing with Piety of Mana. You have a lot of different feedback loops that you sort of have access to on that one as well. You also have Divine Words, which I heard it was described as like Chakra Light, which I think is a really good way of putting it. Basically, you activate this ability, and then you buff one of your next Holy Words and everything like that. So it also grants a corresponding favor. So if you cast Divine Words, cast Serenity, then your Flash Shield, Heal, and Renew heal more, crit strike more often, cost less to cast. I'd be really interested in seeing if you could like Holy Word Salvation, put Renew out onto everybody, and then Divine Words, Serenity, and would those Renews actually just go into overdrive for that extra duration? Maybe so. Sanctify, blessing the area, where it's just kind of giving you a healing rain, which is a throwback to Holy Word Sanctuary, and Chastise, increasing damage, and Smite has a chance to apply Holy Fire. So all those things are pretty dang cool. But if you want to go into like crazy offense, there is a really neat setup that you're going to get out of Burning Vehemence, reducing the cast time of Holy Fire. You're also going to get Holy Fire cooldown reduction for Chastise. Then you get into Searing Light, where you get additional damage if you cast Smite on a target that already has Holy Fire on them. Holy Nova also deals more damage too. But then you get Imperial Blaze. I love this. It refreshes Holy Fire. Your next 3 casts cost no mana, have no cooldown, cast instantly. 30-second CD. It's very low. And whenever it's reapplied, its duration is now extended instead. So you could just stack up a bunch of Holy Fire damage onto 1 or 2 targets or something like that, which would be wonderful if you're in some of these larger pulls and you want to be able to get a bunch of damage on one enemy to help focus it down for the rest of the raid. So I really, really love that. Also, I just remembered that I forgot about one of the disc abilities, so we're going to talk about that real quick, which is Inner Light and Shadow. Yeah, I can't believe I skipped over this one. I apologize. Inner Light and Shadow. Holy crap, this is an amazing ability. This is one of the buffs that you're getting from PvP talents, and it gives you healing spells cost less mana if you have Inner Light on, and then Inner Shadow gives you a damage increase. I love this stance dancing setup that you get for disc. Oh my god, do I love it. I think it's going to be just ridiculously amazing. I would kind of like it if it gave a bit of extended atonement duration, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, but I know they're very stingy when it comes to atonement duration, so just having things cost less mana, freaking absolutely wonderful on that one. But like I said, there's a lot of different options that you have with some of these builds. I would be very surprised if Discipline stays as is for some of the damage reduction that they bring to the table, particularly things like Lenience. I think that's just kind of like a little too insane if that was going to stack with multiple Disc Priests. I do think that you're going to be a lot punchier with a lot of your ramp setups. And I think it's going to be more reminiscent of a Mind Games ramp this expansion, a lot of 45-second burst windows, rather than what we saw out of like Sanctum of Domination, for example, which was like 2-minute, 3-minute Disc Priest or something like that. You know, every minute and a half you would have a ramp. It would either be really big or really small. I think that going forward we're going to have a lot of like shorter, punchier ramps, and you're not going to have as much cooldown reduction or not as much atonement duration increase because you don't have Clarity of Mind. But I think with things like Light's Wrath, Schism buffs, the Inner Light and Shadow, Mind Games, the works, I think you're going to be very, very punchy and very potent. While Holy, yeah, I could see where people are coming from when they're saying that it's not as like crazy impressive. There is a lot of like Renew gameplay, and we don't really see that much synergy for something like Prayer of Healing beyond the like Circle of Healing Prayer Circle buff, which may not even be that good if your gameplay is just going to be surrounded by Renew and follow up like Flash Heal or Heal casts. So it could just be that some abilities like Binding Heal, Prayer of Healing are just kind of tossed by the wayside, and then you're kind of playing a very single targeting type of build again. But there are a lot of good building blocks, particularly on like the side alleyways, you could call them, that are allowing you to start adjusting your build. So I think it'd be kind of interesting. And I think that there are a lot of ways that you could sort of just get around some of these talents and start going further down into maybe things like Imperial Blaze and like a progression environment to start stacking up some damage really quickly during downtime to be able to help out your raid team. So we'll see. Let me know what other kind of talent builds and stuff you put together, what other talent builds you really liked. Overall, I think that the Disc Priest one is more impressive than Holy, but I think it's because Holy is sort of just spreading itself out in a bunch of different directions, and I think it's a little bit weirder to have a specific focus into the gameplay at the moment. So we'll see. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all next time. Whew.